Welcome to the Real Estate Crowdfunding Show, syndication in the digital age at gowercrowd.com, where today you are going to learn why search engine optimization, SEO, is a must-have for your website if you are going to be successful raising money for your real estate projects. And you're going to hear about it from one of the top guys in the country, one of the brightest people I know, co-founder and CEO at Twiz, Lucas Capestany. Lucas is one of those rare people that you get to meet who is a true genius at what they do. Like a master iron chef, Lucas unwraps what SEO is, starting at the highest levels, but diving in deep very quickly. You're going to love it. Candidly, until I met Lucas several months ago, I was completely oblivious to the power of SEO and how by making some basic tweaks to your content production strategy, you can dramatically move the needle on your reach to qualified high net worth prospective investors. And what I also discovered from Lucas, interestingly, one that his partner Christian disputes, and I love uncovering controversy in highly technical environments. It shows just how deep you're getting, was this idea that by improving your SEO, i.e. by helping people find your site when they do Google searches, that you can place an actual dollar value on that by comparing it to the equivalent traffic you might get from advertising. Now, based on the success that I've been having with SEO at GowerCrowd, providing an integrated approach to SEO has become part of the standard packages that we offer to sponsors so that you can raise money for your real estate projects online. If you'd like to see exactly how to build an investor acquisition system so you can also raise more money for your real estate projects online, then go to the podcast page for today's episode at gowercrowd.com and look for the whiteboard workshop link right there. All right, that's it. Time to buckle your seatbelts for one of the most intellectually stimulating discussions about tech that you're likely to hear all year long. Lucas Capestany, co-founder and CEO at Twiz, and what is SEO right now. All right, Lucas, thanks so much for being on my podcast. I know you're very busy, and I'm delighted that you're here. And what I wanted to talk to you about today, as the world expert that you are in SEO, is SEO. That. But I got a question I want to kick off with before we even start. That question is, SEO, isn't it too late for SEO? I mean, people have been talking about it for hundreds of years, and there's a gazillion sites out there. That have all been working on SEO. You're like, why is that? What is it, and why is it important? And does it matter today?
Very good question. I appreciate the kind intro, kind words. Thank you. As far as SEO, here's what I find fascinating. So a lot of people think that same thing that you mentioned, which is that it's too competitive. It's too saturated. The market has no opportunities anymore for people in real estate, specifically because they look at the Zillows of the world and they look at the Trulias of the world, and they think that there's no way you can compete. But the interesting thing is that, and I don't know if I have the statistic 100% right, but it's, I think, 25 to 30%, which is a mind-boggling statistic. But the CEO of Google, and I cannot pronounce his name, said that 25%, I want to say, of all search terms that are searched every day on Google are searched for the first time that day. And while that's a massive number and just insanely huge number, the reason why I think it's accurate is because there are just a mind-boggling amount of phrases that are searched on Google simply because every single day there are thousands, if not millions, of new trends, products, ideas, search terms that are made. And sometimes, I mean, it makes sense. For example, let's say a new house is listed on a market, right? That has a variety of terms that are surrounding that specific location. Let's say there's a new law that's passed. That new law has a variety of search terms around that law. So opportunity in terms of acquiring a demographic is always present because the big dogs are not physically able to cover all of the territory. They can cover a lot of it, but they can't cover all of it because of just the massive amount that's coming out. So you can always capitalize on what we like to call it low-hanging fruit. essentially. So the opportunity that they may not find the largest yield in, but that's because they have the money to capitalize on the largest yield. Instead, but the smaller companies can capitalize on lower yield opportunities, but still a lower yield opportunity to a $100,000 business is still very large to that business, where it might not be as good of an opportunity to capitalize on for a Zillow or a Trulia, right?
All right, so let me ask, let's step all the way back to 50,000 feet, right? What is SEO to the uninitiated? I know I've got a website. What says it? What does it stand for to start with? And what is it?
Exactly. So that's a very good question. A search engine optimization is what it stands for. It's been around since the beginning of search. So the beginning of search engines, essentially Larry Page and Sergey Brin and other search engine company founders essentially tried to find a way to categorize the world's information. So going all the way back to the beginning of search, there's always been people like us essentially optimizing for that categorization in order to be seen more frequently online. So for people like us, our overall goal is to try to comply with the algorithm that these companies create, specifically Google. There's other algorithms as well, like DuckDuckGo or Bing, but nobody uses those as much as they use Google. So what our focus on is trying to deduce the Google algorithm and to determine what specific parameters allows for companies to rank highly on search pages. And that is the process of SEO. It's creating content to essentially feed the beast and to index keywords. And then once you get keyword indexation, to then rank on the first page of Google for as many of those keywords as you possibly can. The reason why the first page is important is because most people don't go to the second or third page at all. And if you're there, then it's very hard for people to find you.
So let me ask you something, actually. So I hear this term a lot, algorithm.
Yeah.
It's used so frequently that I really do believe it's used in most cases by people who have no clue what actually it is. I certainly don't really know exactly what it is. I know the definition of an algorithm, but can you explain what are the moving parts inside Google's algorithm? What does that, what does the concept actually mean?
Yeah, no, I can definitely dive into that for you. And before diving into it, I should probably preface that, and I'll draw some inspiration from a book I just read recently. Actually, it was actually on Bill Gates's top reading list called Homo Deus. It's a new book about the future of humanity. And they talk about how humans are getting to a point where they're developing such complex systems that nobody, not even any one person could even understand the full gravity of what we were creating, which is kind of scary, but that is where we're at. So I should preface that Google is not really fully understood by anybody, even the people who are working at Google. There's so many moving pieces. It's become almost like a demand market of its own, similar to the stock market, in that it's so vast, nobody can really predict what happens. And on top of that, even though it is controlled to an extent, even, for example, it's kind of similar to where, in the stock market, let's say everybody finds a good idea for investment, a good opportunity for investment. Well, then everybody will go and invest in that opportunity. But if everyone goes and invests in that opportunity, it's no longer a good investment. The same thing happens with Google. People start optimizing their websites a certain way, and then everybody starts doing it because it's a great opportunity. And then eventually that opportunity no longer becomes as good of an opportunity as it used to be. So it is its own beast that even Google can't necessarily predict, but I can deduce some of the major elements. So with that all in mind, about 50% and this is from conventional wisdom, both from the massive data we've collected and then also just experience in other communities of SEO experts, but the conventional wisdom is that about 50%, 40 to 50% of all growth in a website is from the trust that the website has built up with Google. Usually that's in the form of backlinks. And how you generate backlinks organically is what people like us put a huge emphasis on, is by putting out quality content online and then trying to encourage other websites to share that content. And the way that happens is by showing up more often on Google. Because people like yourself, people like myself, when we share an article, it's usually because we found it online. If you show up more often online for different terms through optimizing your website and writing content, then that content will get reshared. When it gets reshared, Then you build up trust with Google because you're building what's called backlinks or referring domains. The more that you have, the more your trust is built with Google. The more trust you have built with Google, the higher rankings you're going to get. Now, the other 50% is content, website hierarchy, structure, anything to do with on page, what's on the website. Off page is the other 50%. On page is about 50% on its own. Now, with on page and off page SEO, Neil Patel, who arguably has the most data of any SEO expert, predicts that about 300 to 500, there's about 300 to 500 different ranking factors that he's determined. We've experienced a very similar thing here. There are a lot of different ranking factors, but the most important ones tend to be off page. And the only way for the average business to build off page trust is to start on page and build quality content with the website to then essentially build a community around it. That's the best way to do it.
Okay, and so Google is, so the word that jumps out at me from that description is looking for trustworthy sites. Is that right?
Yes.
So the algorithm is trying to calculate whether or not a site is trustworthy.
Yes.
And to paraphrase what I think you just said, the way that it does that is it looks to see whether or not that site has been referenced by other sites. That's basically it. So it's looking for a web of external links to it, right? Is that kind of a good description of what Google is doing and what it's trying to do?
Yes, and it also is very indicative of how people try to game the system. So a lot
I was going to ask that about hacking. So how do you hack that, right? I mean, it's like, it's gotta be...
So there's a lot of people who are high rollers and they want to hack the system. And they'll create what's called a PBN. And a PBN is a private blogging network. And essentially a private blog network is a series of fake websites that trick Google's algorithm for a short time into thinking that your website is more popular than it actually is. Now, it does work. We've experimented with it on our own websites just to see what happens. And not clients' websites, but our own sites. And it does work, but eventually it does crash. So if you create a web of websites, fake websites, you spin them up, then you will grow very fast in the short run. But then A, your domain could be penalized, which you never know when it's going to be unpenalized. And B, you will suffer a pretty large crash in both keyword indexation and traffic.
When you say penalized, what do you mean by that exactly?
So essentially, Google is essentially always collecting data and trying to build a case against websites if they can detect nefarious conduct. Examples of what nefarious conduct would be, like I mentioned, building out a web of websites, like actually building out these sites that have no traffic, no trust with Google, nothing, and then penalizing sites that are linked to those sites. But they don't do it all at once. They collect evidence over time, and then they have their own filtering mechanism to then penalize them. Another thing to look out for is what's called Google updates. So Google is constantly updating their algorithm every month, every year. And for the last 20 years, they've been making updates. Now, people who don't know how to adapt during these updates, just like a financial advisor helps businesses adapt during an upturn or a downturn, people who don't know how to adapt will eventually falter. So what I always tell people is, look, like especially when working with us, when we do work with them, is look, the work we do will grow your website even if we don't work on it. It'll continue growing after a while. Like if we do 6 months of work, it could grow for another year to 2 years. But the one thing you probably won't be able to do if you stop working with us, even though we don't own anything, is be able to course correct for these upturns and downturns because you don't have enough data. We have 63 companies worth of data. You have very few. So if it starts to crash, you're not going to be able to recover as quickly. We know exactly what to do. You don't. So that is, kind of sales pitch aside, that's kind of the whole idea is people who can navigate through the various updates typically have stronger websites, and your website is very similar to a real estate investment portfolio. Every piece of content you have is almost like an investment into a particular company because of the way it fluctuates during different seasonal changes or updates, if you will.
That's interesting. Yeah, every piece of content becomes an asset to the company, doesn't it? That has put it up there on a website. All right, so Lucas, let's talk about kind of the nuts and bolts, if you don't mind, for a few minutes of what makes for good SEO. We've talked at a very high level for now, and before we started chatting, we covered kind of 5 key things that you might want to be thinking about when improving your own website SEO. So let's chat about those. The first one we talked about was site speed. So tell me about what is site speed, and again, we're talking about Google, right? And accommodating Google's algorithm so that people can find us. So what's site speed got to do with that?
Right. So with site speed, the thing that I always mention to people is that Google at the end of the day is a business, right? And the reason why they place such a huge emphasis on site speed is because a business that is involved in search wants the websites that are building their site in compliance with Google's algorithm to be rewarded for creating a better user experience. Because if somebody searches for something and then they end up finding a website quickly, exactly for what they want, and that user experience is very, very good, meaning they check out, they buy something, or they move through the process that is laid out for the user on the website, maybe that's just reading content or whatever it is, then there's a positive feedback loop that's created between the search engine, the business, and the user. And that creates a whole positive user experience. So the reason why site speed is important is because without proper site speed, then the user experience is typically deteriorated. I mean, have you ever been on a site where it takes 6, 7, 8 seconds to load? You're probably going to click away. The bounce rate is going to be incredibly high. So Google has an imperative to essentially make sure that every site possible is optimally optimized for performance. And if they do that, then they will in turn receive more keyword indexation and receive better traffic. And luckily, it's very easy to determine how fast your site is. There's a lot of tools out there like GT Metrics or Lighthouse or Google Page Insights where you could run a report for free in like 5 seconds to figure that out.
So you've mentioned, see, you're one of these folk that live and breathe. You live and breathe SEO, and I'm just typing a note so I don't forget this. Use terms that you use them as though everybody in the world knows what they mean, but not everybody does. So
yes.
What is keyword indexation? Let's start with that.
Yeah.
And how does that refer to the other word you used in the same sentence, traffic?
Yeah, that sounds great. So keyword indexation and keyword traffic, if you will, increase in tandem often. So what we like to do is we like to look for opportunities where the keyword indexation starts to grow pretty rapidly. And the typical growth of a website is pretty fast keyword indexation. And then once the keyword indexation really starts to kick off, those keywords will then move to the front page of Google, which in turn will generate more traffic. But the overall growth rate of both keyword indexation and keyword traffic is typically in tandem.
So what is keyword indexation?
So keyword indexation is, if you look at Google, so essentially Google's categorization system is built by its algorithm scraping trillions of pages a year. So it's going through and it's constantly scraping many, many, many times a year, all these different pages over and over again. And what it's doing is it's categorizing everything, and it's matching the way a site is structured with relevant phrases that people are searching for. And if they determine by scraping something that a phrase that is searched for online is relevant to a particular website or piece of content, then it will do what's called index it or categorize it for that website, which means that they will point people who search for that to that website by boosting that website up to the first page. So that's essentially what indexation is in a nutshell.
Perfect. So the note that I jotted down was, so what Google is basically doing is matching, it's searching two things, or using two things to create its indexes, if you like. One is it's looking to see what people are searching for.
Right.
And it's then saying, all right, so these most popular searches are keywords. Do these keywords exist on this site? And if there's if there's a relationship between those, or if there's a positive relationship between those, Google says this site is relevant, is important because a lot of people are searching for stuff that's on that site, right? In a simple terms.
Exactly. And so it's this whole relevance mechanism. And the more relevant you are to a certain niche or subset of a niche or a category, the more keyword indexation you're going to procure for that.
Perfect. So that now takes us to the next question, which is, or the next of the 5 rules, let's say, for good SEO. And that is anchor pages. And just one of the wonderful experiences I've had working with you is that up until now, I've been creating an enormous amount of content just because I thought it was a good idea at the time, right? And what you've been doing, and this I'd love to hear you describe the logic and how this works and why it's important. What you've been doing is creating outlines, haven't you, by doing research on what people are searching for. So talk to me about anchor pages and how, when you develop a website or build your website from an SEO perspective, the way you create content kind of changes.
So in terms of creating pages around certain keywords, the reason for that is because when you create a page around a certain keyword, you're essentially signaling to Google the importance of that page to your website. Now, Google ranks websites by a variety of factors, as I mentioned, but one critical piece of the pie is the way your URLs are broken down. Google starts at the top and then scrapes your page continuously. So if your URL has a keyword within it, then it'll serve as an anchor page or a keyword driven page, which then will signal to Google that that particular keyword is incredibly relevant to your business, and then B, will also help to speed up the indexation because it'll help you stand out a little bit more. A lot of other websites in that particular space may not be building these kind of landing pages around particular keywords. They might just be posting content and that's it. But simply making it a keyword driven page basically tells Google that you are placing so much importance on this keyword that you need to draw people to your site for that keyword, and that is particularly relevant. So that's why designing particular pages is important. We've had experiences where some of the pages are the top ranked page on the website because of the importance that that particular keyword has to the site. And now, while blogs are important, a lot of these evergreen pages or anchor pages or what have you tend to drive very relevant, high intent traffic towards the website. So what I always tell people is, look, if you have a service page, really make it a service page and then try to determine what the keyword is that people are searching for before just making the page. Because sometimes people may actually phrase something differently or type something differently than you think. Like we were just working with someone where it was lighting installation. So I guess people search for lighting or design, light design installation more than they search for lighting installation alone. And that distinction is very important because if you do it without the design part in it, then Google will reward more traffic to where more people are searching than vice versa.
So you'll get more conversion. Are you talking about the URL or are you talking about the words that are actually built onto the page?
The URL and the words that are built onto the page. Primarily because they both have to be in tandem. So what a lot of people miss the boat on is they place a lot of importance on their pages, but they place almost no importance on their URL structure or any of the technical components of SEO. And a lot of times what I get over and over again is people will tell me, well, I've used Yoast, the plugin, and I've implemented these keywords, and that's it. But the thing they're missing the point with is that it's an ongoing process. If you do it one time, you might see a bit of a boost, but it's going to level up. If you continually optimize for all these different pieces as you add new pages, it signals to Google that you're an active site and that if you're constantly updating it, you will get rewarded by updating your site for a better user experience, being more topical. And B, you'll be able to implement more and more of this technical work into the site, which will then just make it easier for Google to categorize.
And what I've actually really enjoyed is this this idea that what you do is create outlines for articles. Where you do that. Tell me about the outlines and how you create those outlines, specifically in my space, obviously.
Yeah. So the thing about outlines is that when you just write content to write content, traditionally speaking, at least from what we've seen, the content that we write or that we help people write through an outline performs a lot better. The reason for that is because Google has a particular way of, again, categorizing things, but also wanting to see things formatted. Typically, there's something called your H1 tag, your H2 tag, and your subheadings that are within the article itself. And the actual formatting of that article, making sure that the H1 tag has the proper keyword, the H2 tag has the proper keyword, making sure that the images themselves are using the proper alt text, so then signal to Google that that image is doing particularly well, and looking to see if there's what is called internal linking on every single page to also signal to Google that this is a very important page for this particular subject. Now, the way we determine how different outlines are created is we reverse engineer all of your competitors, and then we determine based on that how they're formatting their pages, what they're using in their different keyword headings, and then we'll try to emulate it but not copy what they're doing and implement it for your site. So the actual strategy of determining the outline is incredibly important, because if it's not broken down in a structured way and it's just a big block of text, then you're probably not going to be as successful with that particular blog. You'll be less readable by Google, and in turn receive less keyword indexation, which leads to less traffic.
Right, and then you also look and see, you also say, for example, in real estate crowdfunding, right? To pick the obvious term. If I wanted to write an article about that, what you will do is you'll do research on, or best practices are to do research on what are people searching for in that genus, if you like. And then what they're searching for, you create an article based on what people are actively searching for. You're going to be writing an article that is the most relevant, rather than what you think people should know. Right?
Yes. Yeah, that's a very common problem. A lot of people don't actually know their customers, and that's something that is a lot of times when people remark as a value out of us, is that we can help them determine exactly what their customers want to learn about, what they want to know, what they're searching for. And that really is the distinction there, is that if you just kind of shoot from the hip, you're not going to land on your feet every single time. You've got to actually plan it in advance. And that's where most people fail when they're writing content. So.
Yeah, that's really interesting. All right, so we've chatted a bit about the H1 and the H2 tags. This is like code on the page, right? So it's actually a way that it's coded on the page.
With the H1, H2 tags, it's if you're on a custom platform, then yes, it can be. The thing about WordPress and Shopify particularly is that they offer user interfaces, which allows you to actually input the H1, H2 tag into the blogs themselves. Unless there's some sort of custom HTML feature, you don't typically have to actually hard code them inside.
In other words, there's a field there that says
put your
heading here and put your subheadings here.
Yes.
And those are the H1 and the H2 tags. And the reason they're important is because Google is actively looking for those when it comes to your site to say, what's this site about?
Well, yeah, and it's because, it goes back to the user experience thing. They found everything they do is based on user experience. So they found that the user experience is better when everything's categorized, because users tend to skim through blogs, or they tend to skim through things. They don't actually read it the way we read a book. They just skim through the headings, and then they'll get the information based on what they want to read.
Very interesting. All right, what about links, external and internal links? Tell me about those.
Yeah, so there's kind of the foundational sort of premise of a link is if it's an external link, it's either follow or no follow, or do follow or no follow. And essentially what that means is that, so imagine you're a big and I'm kind of going off a little bit because this is going to be more about sort of the reason why external linking even exists. But the do follow and no follow links is the basic concept behind external linking. And so imagine you're a big website and you've already generated a lot of traffic. Well, two things are going to happen. One, you're going to want to keep growing and keep your traffic up and keep your trust that you built with Google high. And two, other people are going to want to mooch off that because they're going to see that as a lot of gain for them if they can try to associate themselves with your brand. And so what happened at the beginning of Google and the beginning of search engines is a lot of people try to game the system by pointing their website to other sites to try to make it seem like they were essentially associated with that brand, which would boost their trust and then again boost their traffic. But what Google did is they made a certain external links called nofollow. And what essentially that means is, let's say I want to go to Reddit or I want to go to a certain website that has nofollow linking. And I wanted to create a link within there to point to my website. Well, I can't mooch off the website because the website's going to default any links on that website as a nofollow link, which actually puts within the link the phrase nofollow. And that essentially signals to Google, do not point any websites to like the sites that we don't like.
In other words, don't get the trust from that site.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So the goal of an SEO company is not necessarily to only have do follow links from trustworthy companies, because you definitely want those. That's going to help boost your traffic up substantially. But also it's to generate some no follow links, a healthy balance. So that way it doesn't look like you're trying to game the system. It looks more organic, because if Google only sees a bunch of do follow links from external sources and that are trustworthy, then it's going to be like, well, they just found a way to acquire these links and then it's pointing it towards the site. It could cause some damage. So you typically want to mix that with no follow links as well. So it seems like it's more organic. Typically that's a process that happens organically anyways through writing content and syndicating it on various platforms.
Right. So there's a few ways. So now we're talking about external links coming
into the website.
Right.
And that's what helps build your trust.
That's backlinks. So there's
backlinking.
A couple of ways to do that. One is to have somebody talk about you and say, here, this is this great company, and here's a link to their website or to a page on their website. Yes. Another way of doing that is to write content and give that to a trustworthy third-party site and have them post that there and say, you know, the author of this article came from this website and point back to you, right?
Exactly.
Those are both backlinks.
Both ways you can do it,
So what about, go ahead.
No, I think I know what you're going to say with the internal links.
I was going to move to both the internal links inside a website and external links. In other words, inside an article, you've got
pointing out.
Yeah, you're pointing to other pages inside the site, but you're also pointing to other websites beyond. So explain those two concepts now on page, if you like. How does...
Exactly, yeah. So with internal linking, it has to do with time on site and bounce rates. So the thing about Google, again, is that they ultimately want the best user experience possible. And if users will stay on a site longer, it's usually indicative of them having a better user experience because there's more information for them to devour on that site. So what internal links will do is it will point people from a blog they're currently reading to another blog that they may also find interesting. And then they just keep reading blogs continuously. And if they keep reading these blogs continuously, that will improve time on site, which will also grow the site faster. So it kind of ultimately comes down to the same thing, which is how do you keep people's user experience to be quality, which will, like I said, in turn, generate more trust and more traffic with Google. When it comes to site links that are pointing out from the site to other websites, what's important to keep in mind there is you want to use these, you want to be pointing to other sites as reference. But if you do it in a way where you point to a site of lower quality and you don't reference it as no follow, then you actually could be penalized subtly for making that reference. Because then Google will associate yourself with that website. So you want to make sure that if you're going to do that, that you put the no follow link if the site is of lower quality. However, if you point to references to other sites using links, it actually can be beneficial if the site is of higher quality, because those people will then start to see you as more of a resource. They'll sort of see you as more trustworthy, that you're actually providing real, genuine value to other websites. So one thing that we did, like for one of our clients, is we created an article, top 10 real estate investing websites, because they're in the real estate investment space, they're a software. And we included them as the first one, but then we had the other 9, the other companies. So they were getting their questions answered, and now they're on the first page for real estate investing websites. So that is one way to build trust with the audience, which it sounds redundant, but again, brings everything back to the main point, which is to try to improve user experience and build trust and keep people coming back over and over again to your site, essentially.
Last question of these top 5. So, this I think is more technical, but footers and sitemaps. What is all that about? Why is that important to Google?
Yeah, so the thing about it kind of goes back to the categorization system I had mentioned before that Google has, and how they determine the benefit of a site to a particular user base. The thing about footers is it allows for quick crawlability of a website. So essentially, it has to do more with computer processing power and the ability for Google to scrape trillions of sites, because there are so many sites out there. And if you are able to make your site easily readable for Google, then it's going to reward you for that as well, because it's going to see that you built your site in a certain way, which allows them to scrape it more often and more frequently. And if you scrape the site more frequently, then you'll index more keywords. Because essentially what happens, this is where it gets really interesting, is you have your user experience side of things, which is just improving the user experience. But then you also kind of have to appease Google in a way. Because if you think about it, let's say, this is kind of like a mathematical thing, but let's say that you have your your page, your web page, your home page, and Google comes and it crawls it once, and then it crawls it again, let's say a week or 2 later, right? That frequency is going to happen to, it will crawl the main page, and it will crawl maybe some other pages. But if you have a really big site, then it needs to be able to crawl a ton of different pages. And the only way it can do that quickly and with a similar frequency as the main pages is if you build a footer structure, you build a sitemap, so that way you can go and it can crawl it really quickly and effectively multiple times in a given time period. And every time it crawls a website, it's picking up new keywords and categorizing it. So you want to increase the amount that Google is crawling a website in order to actually get them to pick up more keywords over time. So you kind of have to play by their rules a little bit if you want to keep the keyword indexation up and you want them to be able to read every single page on your website. So,
Lucas, it's fascinating. It's also fascinating to me how you have just dived into this. I mean, your world and life is...
yeah, pretty much.
Well, let me ask you a quick question. I've got sign-off questions and then we're done. Just quick one-liners, all right? But before we do go into that, how did you come to discover SEO was the love of your life?
It's a good question. So SEO, the reason I like it is because I'm very interested in, and actually this is something Google is starting to do, which is very fascinating. They're starting to place a huge emphasis on how they can get out of the search business as much as they possibly can, which is, a bit of a shock. But if you think about it, it's only been 20 years. So it's not like they've been around since the 70s. So anything can happen. They can change to another industry. They can change their direction. But what they're trying to get more into is the knowledge business, which is a derivative of search. It's a more advanced version of search. But essentially, search is not knowledge. Search is just finding an answer to something. And that answer could be right. It could be wrong. So the reason why they're trying to improve their categorization, like through things such as rich snippets, schema markups, things of that nature, very technical categorization features that we work on every day. The reason they're focusing on that is because it'll improve their actual knowledge base, meaning that so if you search for something, instead of you just getting an answer based on, a website following certain things, you'll get the best answer. And if you get the best answer, then you'll be able to learn faster. You'll be able to be more knowledgeable about certain things. And it kind of increases our whole collective society's understanding of certain topics and areas and overall education, right? So what I love is that as someone understanding search, understanding SEO, I'm kind of on the forefront of this whole knowledge revolution. You know, they say, who is it? Ray Kurzweil, the futurist. He always talks about how your phones are essentially an extension of your brain. And in a similar way, Google has essentially expanded our knowledge quintillion times, and it's going to continue to expand it. So what I am very excited about is being involved in that. And I think as they move more into the knowledge space and not as much into the search space, it'll get more and more exciting. So that's what really fascinates me. And that's why I'm always trying to get up to date with all this and stay as on the ball as possible. So.
Fascinating, Lucas. Thanks so much. Let me ask you 3 sign-off questions. I'm delighted you've been talking today. Thanks so much. Yeah. I remember why it was I really liked you the first time.
That's good. I appreciate that.
Let me ask you 3 sign-off questions, quick questions. Okay. So for somebody, you've been working with me for a while now. So for somebody who is first starting off, raising money online, right? So as a real estate developer, raising money online, I suppose is the most important thing that they should keep in mind if they're starting absolutely from zero.
Educate your audience, because we've spent so much time researching real estate sites, and luckily, and this is, I guess, even more pivotal than just the advice to educate your audience. Always look at the data, because the data shows that every site in the space for real estate investment, real estate syndication, real estate in general is writing troves and troves and troves of information for their audience. And the reason for that is because if you think about it, real estate is a very expensive proposition. You're investing thousands, if not hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars into something. You have to be very well educated about it. And also your demographic is somebody who reads a lot. So what you need to be doing is you need to be creating a community. You need to be an authority on your subject. And if you are, then you will be able to attract those people, because Google will see that your website is valuable to that community since everyone else is doing it, and you can actually compete. And you don't need to be like, a very large company in this space. You can just cut out a certain slice of the pie. You don't need 1 million visitors a month. If you get 10,000 visitors a month, you'll be cooking, because I have businesses we work with some of them only have 2,000 visitors a month. But they are getting a lot of conversions because the conversion rate is pretty high. So it just kind of varies amongst different businesses. But I would say start by educating your audience. That's the most important thing.
Second question. What's been the hardest lesson you've learned online?
Well, for me, the most difficult thing is that online, so with Google, kind of going back to the original, point I had about how not everybody knows what's going to happen. That is probably the most frustrating thing in general, because you never know exactly if what's going to happen if what you think will happen will work. And so the most frustrating thing or disappointing thing to me has been sometimes the inability to accurately predict trends that will occur within the marketplace, which is, I guess, just in general, the frustration of anybody, trying to do investments or forecasting. It is very difficult sometimes to know exactly what might happen. I think the way I've been able to reconcile that is just looking at it from a true value perspective. Even though something might grow, 5,000% in a quarter, and then it drops 1,000%, right? Well, that would be bad. Now, let's say it drops 15%, right? Then you have to look at it from the overall trend. You can't just base it off of a month or 2 months. And that's advice for, investors as well. Just, you have to base it on the trend. So I think the most frustrating thing is just that, not always being able to accurately keep my emotions in check when looking at them, and just trying to look at it as, okay, is this website actually increasing in value? And the answer is yes. Then how can we keep increasing its value instead of focusing on large scale, increases, because that's not always the best number to look at. So.
Fascinating. Final question. What are your personal key daily habits that make you successful online?
Ooh, good question. Well, okay, so yes, it's good that you mentioned the word daily, because what I find is it has to be a pretty comprehensive approach. So the thing about our business and what we've been able to do is we've always placed an emphasis on having an omni-channel approach. That's good from an SEO perspective because Google rewards businesses more if they have multiple channels. So I never talk about other channels. I think it's because I'd be hypocritical. I do other channels as well. Paid advertising, we do SEO, obviously. We do social media, email marketing. It doesn't matter. What I've learned though is that being consistent about putting out content, no matter what it is, and consistent with quality, not just always pushing out content to push out content, but being quality about the content you push out, that will lead you to more visitation. And not only that, I'll leave you, this is probably the most important thought in general about marketing that I've learned recently. It will bring your cost to acquire a customer down. So the reason why people like Gary Vee and all these businesses talk about trying to be a media company nowadays, that every business is a media company, is because with social media on the online world, the more reach you have, the more you can retarget people. And the more you can retarget people, the cheaper cost to acquire customers, because they're the highest intent audience and you have so many of them that they already know about you. And you're just following them around the internet. And it's kind of creepy, but that's how every business does it nowadays. I mean, that's how you get such low cost to acquire a customer. So what I would say is that retargeting is probably the most pivotal thing that's happened to marketing in general, because before you had a billboard, it was very hard to retarget someone with that billboard. It's very difficult. Now you're online on so many different places and it follows you around. That's why you see the same ad for something over and over and over again. That's because it's following you around. And doing SEO will keep people on your site longer and attract more people, which will then expand your high intent audience and then retarget people who have a high intent for something, and that will get you more and more conversions. So the daily habit is just to try to increase my reach every day. It doesn't really matter about which channel, just increase your reach every day, whatever it is. So.
Lucas Capestany, Twiz founder. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you.
That was Lucas Capestany, co-founder and CEO at Twiz, discussing his insights and knowledge about SEO. I'll include links on the podcast page for today's episode to Lucas's company and to some of the other things that we discussed today at gowercrowd.com, where you can also watch the whiteboard presentation that I put together for you that walks you through the exact system used by the top real estate syndicators raising capital online. That's all at gowercrowd.com. And hey, thank you for listening today. And thank you, Lucas Capestany, CEO at Twiz, the SEO experts, for spending your time with me today. That's all for this episode. I'll see you next time. And for now, this is Dr. Adam Gower signing off.